Well, we're moving to load shedding level 2 for the weekend. Eskom announcing this just a little earlier. Firm action from the power utility today as well, suspending the Kendal and Tutuka power station managers for what they call apathetic behaviour. But a serious allegation from energy analyst Ted Blom speaking to me a little earlier. He says Eskom is pulling the wool over our eyes. And we were not on level 4, load shedding, last night and the night before, but actually level 6. And he says this is because nearly 6,000 megawatts were shed from the grid. Well, for a response to that, we're joined now by Eskom spokesperson Sikunati Manchancha. Good evening, Sikunati. I'd just like a response to what Ted Blom said earlier. He said he's looked at the figures and that actually much more was shed from the grid than what would be typical for level 3 or 4. What's your response?
The sad part is that that kind of allegation comes from a person by the name of Ted Blom, who obviously is an energy analyst. The truth to this is, and Ted Blom should know this, Rule NRS 048-9 from NERSA of 2017 says Eskom can call on customers, pre-approved industrial customers, to reduce load by 20% whenever we're on stage 4. So this is not to the public where we take an additional 1,200 megawatts, but to pre-approved customers who have a red line to Eskom and vice versa and are waiting for that call. At a notice that has been agreed upon, Eskom will call on these industrial customers, the example here would be the smelters, to say, please reduce by 50%. In the report, Ted Blom got this from the statistics that Eskom publishes every evening that I personally tweet. We just put all of that in one line. In addition to the 4,000 megawatts of stage 4 load shedding, we add this load curtailment, which, let's repeat again, is according to the rules NERSA provided. It's called load curtailment. That will be in Rule NRS 048-9.
Right. Okay, so I heard you. I just want to come in here, Sikunati. So you're talking now that we've got load shedding, we've got load reduction, which we all know what that is, but now we've got load curtailment. Isn't this semantics? The reality is you needed to ask your big customers to cut some of their requirements. And in total, that took us up to nearly 6,000 megawatts, which by definition is level 6. In other words, putting all that aside, the picture's a lot worse than the public were led to believe, because a lot more had to be taken off the grid.
Eskom always tells the public that we will go to stage 4, which is reducing by 4,000 megawatts. And we then use the mechanisms that are approved by the NERSA to directly talk to customers and give them a notice, the large industrial customers, which is, by NERSA's own definition, load curtailment.
Okay, so we should be aware of 3 things: load curtailment, load shedding, load reduction. And the picture that I'm getting is that things are tough for Eskom. We know this, but it is not simply what individual consumers have to deal with. It's a bigger picture, which brings in other factors. I still think it's semantics. At the end of the day, it's a bigger load than we as individual customers have expected.
In all of Eskom's communications, we always make it clear that there is interruptible load from industrial customers, where Eskom has an agreement that it can buy some power back from them, meaning, please stop your running your factories for this period, and Eskom will compensate you for that. But then there is load curtailment, which again goes to those industrial customers to say, please reduce because we really need this power. And Eskom has always stated this publicly to the people of South Africa. There is absolutely no surprise. And we have not and never have pretended that the situation...
So the only difference, the result is the same. You have to shed from the grid. One is voluntary. You go to the customer and say, please cut. And the other happens because we're on a schedule. I hear where you're coming from. The other two things that Ted Blom said is that Eskom's run out of diesel and that you don't even have enough baseload capacity. In other words, those are the very basics. Please respond to those comments as well.
Any self-respecting journalist who has been following and listening to Eskom's messages knows, one, that each time you run a generator, you then have to stop the generator and fill the diesel again. All our suppliers always are giving us the orders that we have. So that's again out there. The statement I issued about an hour ago, we said we will again load shed this weekend because we need to replenish these supplies. You cannot pour diesel at a generator that is running at that time. So I do not understand what...
So just to be clear, you haven't run out of diesel, or you have?
Not at all.
Okay, that's great. Just wanted to clear that up.
Runs still down, and you stop the generator and pour diesel again, and then run it down again, just like you pour fuel into your car.
So you're refuting that. I just want to chat to you very quickly as well about the action taken against two of the power station managers suspended, Kendal and Tutuka. A very strongly worded statement from Eskom saying there needs to be a culture change, that sort of apathetic behaviour will not be tolerated. There's weak consequence management. Ted Blom saying, well, the real problem is you've got 44,000 staff and you actually only need around 20,000. So there is a rather apathetic feeling at the parastatal. Just talk to us about today's decisions. Is this a sign of a culture change?
Absolutely. Eskom's chief executive yesterday morning, not today, yesterday morning marched up to the power stations, to two power stations, Tutuka and to Kendal, together with the chief operations officer and the head of generation, and personally handed suspension letters to the people managing those power stations. This is indeed the start of a culture where people have to be held accountable for their performance or lack thereof. It cannot be business as usual that we will come every afternoon and make explanations and excuses as to why we have to plunge the country into load shedding. There has to be consequences in people not, or in assets not performing. So the two managers at Tutuka and Kendal have been suspended in order for Eskom to investigate the reasons why their power stations have not been performing as well as they should.
So the reality is, while we know that Eskom, we always told, is working night and day to sort out the problems, that the reason units break down is because of ailing infrastructure, the reality is there's another factor, and that's a human factor of people who don't actually care that much at Eskom. Am I right?
The reality is that you have 44,000 who need to be managed, and it is the duty of the executive management team to make sure that people do deliver what they promise to Eskom, and which then in turn makes promises to the people of South Africa. Everywhere where there are human beings, there needs to be a management system. And at Eskom, this management team has a duty to make sure that it manages performance. If it makes commitments to the people of South Africa, it should be able to be held accountable, and therefore the people that are supposed to deliver that outcome are themselves held accountable.
Indeed they are.
This is only the start. There should be a high-performance culture at Eskom. It cannot just be business as usual.
Absolutely.
If you have...
Thank you so much, and we look forward to that culture change and getting further updates from you, Sikunati Manchancha of Eskom.